With talk of there being a big real estate shift on the horizon, you're probably wondering, what exactly does it look like moving forward for Anchorage that we're seeing? Are we seeing a market shift in the numbers? Should we expect any big changes coming up in the near future? My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor with Keller Realty here in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today, we're going to be looking at what's going on in the residential, the condo, and the multifamily market right here in Anchorage, year to date up to this point. So it's going to be for the entire year to date up through May. So we're going to be taking a look at everything. Before we get started, do make sure you give this video a like, make sure you subscribe, and by all means, if you have any questions, do make sure you post those down below. Now let's go and jump into the market update. Now, the first thing we're going to check out is what's going on in the residential side. So this time last year, the total number of properties we had available on the market was about 340, which was really down, for the previous years. But what we're seeing is now it's down to about 275. So we started out low, and we're actually coming in even lower as far as what's available on the market. The next thing we see is the total number of properties that have actually sold in this market during the time period we're looking at was about 312 this time last year, and now it's roughly about 260 properties that have actually closed. So starting to see a dip in the number of properties that are actually going under contract. We'll talk about whether or not this is a something for us to be aware of in the summary. The next thing we need to look at is what's going on in the average sold price. So the average sold price this time last year, year to date, was about $424,000. Now it's about $449,000. So that's pretty significant. It's gone up that much. That's approximately a 6% increase. Now the average sold price 2 years ago was about $398,000, somewhere right around there. Yeah, $396,000. Not bad. So $396,000, obviously gone up a little bit since then. Now, the thing that really catches my attention is the year before, the average sold price was about $375,000. This time, year to date, back in 2019. So we see just how aggressively things have appreciated over just a couple of years here. So that's something we're going to remember. Let's go and switch gears though and take a look at condos. Now, the next thing we're going to check out in condos is obviously the active inventory. This has really taken a shellacking, this year compared to the year before. This time last year was about 234 condos were available in Anchorage. Now it's 91. And that's actually kind of been the trend across the board really for this entire year. And it's one of the reasons that we're seeing condos are actually selling more now than they were before, just because there's so few options out there for people. And the reason that they're becoming more popular is because people are kind of getting beat out on all these houses, and they're starting to take a closer look at condos. So that's pretty significant to have that much of a sloughing off of the active inventory for condos. Now, the next thing that we see is that even though we've had that huge drop in inventory, we are still seeing that a lot of people still want condos here in Anchorage, because we actually see that there was about 119 condos sold this time last year in May. Now it's about 138 sold for this past month over in May. And that's kind of been the trend we've seen really month over month throughout the year for condos. So despite the fact that condos are not as desired as the residential homes, we are still seeing more condos selling than the previous year, even though the inventory is so compressed down at this point. So that really does speak to the demand that's out there. Now, the next thing we want to look at is what's going on as far as the average sold price. So just looking at that, you might think, hey, there's going to be just an explosion for the average sold price, and it's going to be like 40-50% higher than it was before, just because there's so much properties that are selling, even though there's not a whole lot of demand. Supply and demand, you would think it would just be off the charts, but not really. So it went from about 230,000 about this time last year to about 239,000 now. Not a huge swing in either direction. Really what this market is doing is it's giving a lot of condo owners who might not have been able to sell before the ability to actually sell their properties and walk away, free and clear and be done with them. A lot of these are probably condos that have kind of struggled to sell in the past just because of the association or for whatever reason. And now buyers are taking a closer look at these properties just because they're getting so beat up on the residential side. So That's what we're seeing as far as that goes. It's still an increase, but people don't buy condos because they expect to get a lot of appreciation. They buy condos because it's a lot easier to manage, because you have the association there. They're going to be covering a lot of the services you'd be paying for anyway. There's the convenience aspect of it. And yeah, that's really why people buy condos. It's not really for appreciation. Let's take a break real quick. For those of you who've been watching for a little bit, you know that I host a podcast called The Alaskan Journey, where I interview people who have actually lived in Alaska for a while. So for those of you who are considering moving up here, you might consider giving that a listen and just seeing what it's like living up here from other people's perspectives. And for those of you who are considering selling your property and making a move, do feel free to reach out to me on my website down below and put seller guide into the little message box being sent to me. If you'd like to receive a copy of my free seller guide to kind of get you started as you're trying to decide what exactly this process looks like when you're moving forward with getting your property sold. Now let's go ahead and jump in and talk about what's going on in a multifamily market right here in Anchorage. All right. Wow, there has definitely been some stuff going on in the multifamily properties here in Anchorage. So the past couple of years, we haven't really seen that drastic of a change in the multifamily inventory for what's been available here in Anchorage. But this past year, there's been a ridiculous drop-off in the number of active properties that are available. This time last year, there's about 171 that are available. This year, there's about 78. So enormous drop-off from where we were before. Probably a lot of that has to do with the fact that rents are up right now, and so landlords really don't want to let their multifamily properties go just because they're cash flowing really well, because they're paying on the mortgage of when they purchased it, years ago in the past, and the mortgage hasn't gone up, but the rents have gone up. So there's really not much of an incentive for them to let it go, other than them wanting to find something better, or just having personal reasons and deciding they need to sell the property right now. The next thing we're seeing is that the number of properties that have been multifamily properties that have actually sold has gone up from about 33 the year before to 44 this year. So I've seen a pretty sizable increase there. That's what we would expect with kind of the factors that I mentioned before of multifamily properties becoming more valuable because the rents are going up. And so for a lot of reason, a lot of people are jumping on it and taking advantage of the low interest rates while we can. I know that sounds crazy for those of you who are watching all the doom and gloom channels out there saying the interest rates are just completely unbearable and everyone's going to break under them. But historically, these are really low interest rates. And it's what you have right now is probably the lowest interest rates you're going to get for the rest of 2022. So take advantage while you can. Now, for the average sold price year to date for multifamily properties, I really find very limited utility in examining what the average sold price is doing for multifamilies, just because they incorporate everything from, or they include everything from the little duplex all the way up to like the huge industrial 30-plex commercial property. So for that reason, I have a hard time taking it seriously. But for those of you interested, average sold price was about $500,000 this time last year. Now it's about $496,000. So a little bit of a dip, not too much though. So across the board, the summary is that we're seeing that we are still seeing a big supply shortage. We're still seeing a lot of demand. Average sold price hasn't really gone anywhere just yet. I will say anecdotally, I am starting to see kind of longer days on market start to creep up on a lot of houses here in the area, which that's not necessarily like a sign of doom and gloom. It is something we keep a pretty close eye on, though, just to make sure. In this market, haven't really started to see it reflected in the data just yet, so it's still being collected on condos. We kind of talked about that before. If you're looking at selling, you've been considering selling a condo for a while, this is probably going to be your best opportunity to do it. And on the investment properties with the multifamilies, the value in the property is going to be more tied to what the rental incomes are. Now, the only concern I have right now with jumping in and purchasing rental properties is just making sure that the numbers make sense, even in the event that there is some kind of a correction in the rents and those do go back. If you're barely hanging on right now and you're buying some kind of a rental income and the numbers barely make sense now at the top of the market, you're not going to leave yourself very much margin for error at all if it adjusts back the other way. So just something to be aware of, but that's been your summary. If you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to me on my website down below, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have and help as best I can. Talk with you later.